Everyone is talking about the new Netflix special Griselda, starring the incredibly talented and beloved Sofia Vergara. This limited series tells the true story of Griselda Blanco, an infamous Colombian cartel leader who earned herself some pretty iconic titles, like the Cocaine Grandmother, La Madrina, and the Black Widow.
For the last 3 years, Griselda Blanco has owned Miami, distributing cocaine.
Ms. Blanco's operation has been efficient, deadly, and incredibly successful.
While this series does a great job portraying Griselda's incredibly dramatic and dangerous lifestyle, it doesn't always get into the nitty-gritty details of her crimes, or tell you just how evil this drug queen pin really is. This woman did some pretty sick and twisted things. The heartless, yet brilliant way she operated within the drug trade is part of what made her just that terrifying. In fact, the infamous drug king, Pablo Escbobar himself, was even said to be afraid of her. This is a woman who may have been evil, but definitely knew how to get things done. Griselda is believed to have played a role in literally hundreds of murders. So let's take a closer look at her fascinatingly horrifying life. During the 1970s and all the way through the 2000s, Griselda Blanco would prove herself to be incredibly efficient and seemingly untouchable as she dominated the trade of narcotics from Colombia to the United States. Nobody could stop her, and eventually, few tried. She wasn't afraid to destroy anyone who tried to get in her way, and often did. So how does someone find themselves in this kind of lifestyle? Griselda did not have a very easy start to her life, and turned to a life of crime before she had even entered her teen years. She was born on February 15th of 1953 and moved to Colombia, Medellin, when she was very young. It was her mother who introduced her to crime early on, and Griselda seemed to be a very fast learner because she reportedly committed her first notable crime when she was only 11 years old. Unlike many young criminals, Griselda wasn't one for petty crime. She went straight to hardcore felonies. Her first crime reportedly involved the kidnapping of a young boy, the son of a wealthy family. But when the boy's parents didn't pay the ransom she asked them for, she decided to kill the boy instead by viciously firing at him. This was only the very beginning of a long life of crime. By the time that Griselda was 13 years old, she was already involved in a lot of illegal activity, including pickpocketing and selling herself for money. The year she turned 13 years old was also the year that she first started living with a guy. The man's name was Carlos Trujillo. Not only was he, of course, way older than her, but he was also a hardened criminal himself. The way he made his living was by forging documents and working with young girls who were interested in making money by having relations with men. So safe to say, Carlos was probably the last person that anyone would want their young daughter living with. Griselda and Carlos ended up getting married and having 3 sons together, despite her young age. Together they built the beginning of a very impressive drug empire. It's not too surprising that a marriage like theirs didn't last very long. They ended up splitting up after they both had trouble agreeing on how the empire they shared should run. Griselda was not about to let a man tell her how to do things. So after they divorced, ruthless Griselda ended up having him killed to get him out of the way for good. From then on, Griselda's power as a drug queen pin only continued to grow. She got married for a second time, and she and her family moved to the United States, where they settled in Queens, New York. Griselda may have no longer been living in Colombia, but that didn't mean that she had any less influence there. If anything, she was becoming more well-known, respected, and feared than ever before. In Colombia, Griselda started her own lingerie factory, but as you can probably imagine, her primary goal wasn't selling women's underwear. Instead, she used this as an opportunity to smuggle even more drugs into the United States. She would have the garment she sold made with little secret pockets, and the drugs would be hidden in there. At the time, most members of law enforcement weren't thinking about searching women's undergarments for hidden drugs, so this method worked out pretty well for her. This unique way of smuggling drugs is just one of the many ways that Griselda proved how truly brilliant and cunning she really was. So fast forward to the year 1975. Griselda and her family's drug trafficking organization had grown at a massive rate, and the authorities were after them. There was a lot of pressure on U.S. law enforcement to track down and stop this group of people that were bringing literally tons of illegal narcotics into the country. The feds were able to catch up with Griselda's criminal family, and 150 members of their team were arrested and taken into custody. While Griselda and her then-husband Alberto Bravo were among those initially brought in by law enforcement, they ended up fleeing the country before they could actually be indicted. This meant that if U.S. prosecutors wanted to try to charge and convict them for smuggling and selling drugs, they would have to find them first, and this would be no easy task. Back in Colombia, the plan had been for Alberto and Griselda to continue running their drug empire together. But just like what happened before, it wouldn't be long until Griselda ultimately decided that she no longer needed Alberto by her side. So when the two got into a brutal argument and weapons were drawn, she ended up killing him. Griselda actually ended up getting severely injured too in the fight, but like the unstoppable boss she was, she didn't let even a bullet to the stomach keep her down for long. The second that she was on her feet again, she was back to running the drug empire, this time taking everything into her own control. Meanwhile, people all around the world knew about Griselda's drug empire by now. Many had heard rumors that it was being run entirely by a woman, but some were hesitant to believe this. After all, the drug trade, especially the organization that Griselda was running, was a ruthless business. Not only was it extremely dangerous, but it often involved bloodshed. Most women, many believed, didn't have the stomach to do what Griselda did.
I was surprised that it was a woman, hard to fathom.
We were all surprised that a female godmother was responsible for this much violence, could be this evil.
At this point, Griselda had 4 sons, and each one of them had a special role to play in the so-called family business. If anybody thought that becoming a mother would make her soft, they were very much mistaken.
One of the reasons that I so like Griselda Blanco de Trujillo is she shows you where women's rights are. You think there isn't a woman who can compete in the tough and rough world of drug dealing? Go and look at Griselda and she'll straighten you out very quickly on that.
It wasn't just that Griselda was tough enough to keep a business like this running smoothly. It was that she had a great understanding of the market. She knew what she was doing, and she knew how to do it better than anyone else.
She broke the glass ceiling in terms of female drug traffickers. She was somewhat of a visionary. She knew that the market for cocaine hydrochloride was starting to expand in the United States. She saw an opportunity and she took advantage of that.
Griselda and her family became so extremely rich through the drug trade that it is almost hard to wrap your head around. Sometimes they were bringing in as much as $80 million in just a month. But of course, living like this came at a price. They were constantly on the run as they tried to evade law enforcement. In February of 1985, the feds finally managed to catch up with Griselda and bring her into custody. She was faced with a slew of charges, including manufacturing, distributing, and importing drugs. She ended up being convicted and was sentenced to 15 years behind bars. While serving out her sentence, Griselda was hit with even more charges in connection to her life of crime. This included 3 counts of second-degree murder. She was then sentenced to 20 years, which was expected to run concurrently to her previous sentence. It looked like the Black Widow's run had finally come to an end, and that the rest of her life would likely be spent in a prison cell. At least that is what everyone thought. But after Griselda's health began to rapidly decline, she ended up being released in 2004 and was sent back to Colombia.
In June of 2004, Griselda Blanco was released and immediately deported as well.
We all believed at the time that she had made so many enemies in her professional life that as soon as she reached the tarmac on the airport in Colombia, that her lifespan was almost nil. Turns out we were all wrong.
Like she had always done before, Griselda ended up surprising everyone because she was not killed immediately after her release. In fact, she ended up living for many more years. She even became a born-again Christian and seemed determined to finally start living a life that was free of crime. But even though Griselda was given a second chance at life, it didn't mean that all her enemies from before just disappeared. If anything, the fact that she was no longer behind bars meant that she was in more danger than ever. Some of the people who had longed for a chance to see her taken down for good now actually had another chance to kill her themselves. On September 3rd of 2012, Griselda and her pregnant daughter-in-law took a trip out to Medellin. They stopped by a local butcher store to purchase some meat when all of a sudden they were ambushed by an assassin riding by on a motorcycle. Griselda was shot and killed at the age of 69. Ironically, the style in which the Black Widow's life was ended was quite similar to the way that she used to have people killed in the past. While to much of the world she was a ruthless killer and drug dealer, many people forget that Griselda Blanco meant something very different to her family. To her 4 sons, she was simply Mom. Her youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco, was particularly devastated by his mother's unexpected murder. He knew a side to his mother that the rest of the world didn't get to see. And regardless of the things she may have done in the past, she was still his mother. Michael has said that the only reason that his mother's enemies decided to ambush her when she was nearing old age was because they knew that she was far too powerful to ever be taken down in her prime.
It's kind of hard to see my mom's tomb because reality sets in, you know. You got your beautiful grandchildren and you got your beautiful granddaughter here, and I'm gonna make sure that they don't have to grow up how we did and live that life. They're gonna be good kids. I just want to make you proud, Mama.
While he still honors his mother's memory and wishes that she was still here to see her children and grandchildren grow up, Michael doesn't want their childhoods to be full of evil, bloodshed, and violence the way that this was.
I think she's watching this from up there, Mike, and I think she's really happy. She knows why you can't be here, but she's so happy that you're here in spirit.
Although Griselda has been dead now for a while, it is safe to say that her volatile life will not soon be forgotten, and it's hard to picture anyone else taking her place. Please like and subscribe, and let us know what you think of Netflix's show on her life.